Hey you, welcome back to the Human Experience. I'm your host, CRUSE, and this is the place where we talk about all things human, all things life, and everything in between. We are redefining what it means to be human for ourselves rather than listening to what everyone else has to say about it. All right, guys, we have a super exciting episode today. We have AmandaLuketa, who is a self-concept coach who I found on TikTok, and I'm so excited to talk with her today. Thank you so much for being here, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm so excited to talk to you today. I know we talked before about how I feel like we're going to have a problem capping this conversation off at some point because I feel like we'll have so much to talk about. But the first thing I wanted to get into was your spiritual journey, kind of like what spirituality means to you and your experience with spirituality.
Yeah. So there's like so many pieces to this journey, but
Totally.
I think like so many people, I went down a very traditional path of, going to lots of college and thinking that I had to get a 9 to 5 in a profitable area.
Yeah.
So I went down that path for so many years and realized that it wasn't for me. This was probably about 5 years ago now, like in my mid-20s. And so I started this whole like entrepreneurship journey. And, initially I found the standard kind of personal development stuff like Tony Robbins.
Okay,
and that led me to Abraham Hicks. And there were certain, characters in my reality at that time who were also kind of helping me along that path. And that led me to, the work of Neville Goddard and just on and on and on from there. So yeah, so that spiritual journey kind of unfolded a little bit later for me than I see it in a lot of people. A lot of people I notice will find it kind of like in their late teens, early 20s. And for me, it was a bit later.
Gotcha.
But that's kind of like the condensed version.
No, I gotcha. Thank you for sharing. So do you feel like realizing that the 9 to 5 kind of traditional society's way of living, realizing that that wasn't for you, is that what kind of trajected you into spirituality and researching different things and kind of just having a different concept on life?
I think that it was more once I had kind of like dipped my toes into the world of online business, like being able to make a way for yourself online. I found a lot of the same sort of constraints or boxes in the entrepreneurship world. Like you have to have sales funnels and convert people in a certain way and create this type of content.
Right.
And while I was still doing it for myself, it was still like, here are these neat little boxes to fit in as an entrepreneur.
Right.
So yeah, it was kind of a mixture of that sort of propelling me out of that world.
Gotcha. So that's kind of like a similar thing for me, the same way. Like I did like a semester of college and was kind of like, I don't know if this is for me at the moment. Maybe I'll go someday, but I was just like, I've been through 12 years of school. Like I need a minute to figure out who I am and what I actually want because I'm spending all this money here. I don't even know what I want to do yet. So I feel like the confines of feeling like I had to fit into a certain box societally to be successful or survive and thrive, that kind of made me feel very overwhelmed. And once I started to kind of like try and research different ways of living, because I knew that that really wasn't for me, I fell into a spiritual understanding of just having this perspective that there isn't only one way to live, that society's way to do it isn't the only way to do it. And so from there, I kind of fell down a rabbit hole and have never returned. So talking about society's boxes and conditioning and whatnot, I know that both of us have a maybe, I mean, I would say non-traditional outlook, on society currently, but I think it's becoming more common outlook is that, there is more ways to do things. So talking about conditioning, what are kind of some of the first things you noticed in relevance to how society conditions us to be a certain way?
Yeah, man. So there are so many,
aren't there?
so many collective stories that, so this is kind of a concept that I've been playing with. So as an individual, you can have an idea or a belief or a way of living, right? But then as more and more and more people begin to adopt that concept takes on a momentum of its own.
Yeah.
And so it's bigger than the individual at that point. It's like a collective understanding that it gets passed down through our DNA. It's like we're coded with this from birth and then, born into families who like reinforce it, schools, teachers, the media is a big one. Yeah. So I think some of the biggest conditioning that we're kind of inundated with, one surrounds money. You have to work hard to make money.
Right.
Money is in limited supply. you got to do certain specific things to make sure you are safe. Otherwise, there is this impending doom scenario that's going to happen and your life's going to suck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then even with kind of a subset of that just has to do with work. Like there's just this whole idea that we go to school to get a job, to make enough money so that we can retire and avoid the impending doom. And it's so much less about thriving than it is about avoiding a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that perspective, because I just feel like that was one of the, like for me, coming across realizing that we are kind of indoctrinated into living in a certain way was kind of like my wake up moment, like, hold on a minute, why? And so it's something that I actually kind of like to call the blueprint trap, because I feel like when we're born, we're just dropped into a society that's already running, a society that already has these rules, regulations, and standards that they require you to jump through to thrive. And then like the impending doom you were talking about, if you don't make money or work hard, or if you're not a productive member of society in the way they want you to be, you're homeless or whatever. And we have all of these like these surrounding things around us that show us if you're not doing what we want you to do, your life's not going to be that great. And so that's one of the reasons why when people say that drives me crazy is when they're like, well, if you don't like it here, go somewhere else. And it's like, well, why wouldn't I just make where I'm at better? Like, why wouldn't I just try and make that like work for me and be fulfilling for me? Like, you don't have to change what you're doing, but what's the problem with me wanting to exist more authentically and live in a way that feels best for me rather than just doing what everybody else is doing?
Right. And something that's coming up based on what you just said is this idea of statistics. So that is one of the biggest deterrents to breaking out of this conditioning of the money trap and the 9-to-5 and all of that.
Capitalism.
We have these, well, yeah, I mean, so that could be a whole nother like rabbit hole that we could go down for sure. But it's this idea. So I'll just give an example. Art is something that I really enjoy, painting. But I was told from a very young age that good luck making it as an artist. Because statistically, most artists fail. And then you have like the starving artist stereotype. But what I have learned along this journey is that individual human beings cannot be categorized into statistics.
Oh, 100%.
And that is also so not accepted in the mainstream. And I think that's a really big thing that locks so many people into a way of being that doesn't serve them.
Absolutely. And it's so, I feel like it's so much pressure and so overwhelming because of the way society has set it up, in the sense that like, if you don't make money, you're not really valued. Like money equals value, worth, status. And it's just, it puts this emphasis on like you kind of living and creating outside of yourself rather than from within yourself, because somebody is telling you this is what you have to do rather than you kind of figuring out what you want to do for yourself. And it traps us in so much, and it drives me nuts, because like when you really start to think existentially or think outside of society's parameters, you're like, dude, we cut down trees and make up money. Like it's made up. Like we cut down the living ecosystems that give us life to like make this fake paper, like, well, it's real paper, but just to make this like innuendo that's not actually real. We give it its value. All these pieces of paper are the same, and we write a number on it, and that's the value that it gives. Like it's just, it's this system that doesn't really make sense. It's just what we've always done and all we've known, and so it makes sense to us in that way. But it's like the way I kind of think about it sometimes is if we were to go out into nature, like into the wild, and see wild animals in suits and dresses and like paying rent to live in a tree, like that would be so weird. And it's like to flip that back on us, it's like, why is that not the same kind of weird for us? Like, why have we let a group of people indoctrinate us into believing that paying for Earth's natural resources that Mother Nature provides for free is like a sane thing to do? It's like crazy, actually. We are making life harder for ourselves than it needs to be. And it's like, for what? What's the reason for that? You know?
Yeah, exactly. There was a thought there that came up when you said Mother Earth's natural resources. Oh, yeah. So the other sort of piece to this indoctrination comes from history. So when we are taught about history, it's typically through the lens of, take any standard history textbook in like elementary, middle school, high school, whatever, that pretty much everyone goes through. Is that these older civilizations were primitive. meaning
Yeah.
less than.
Yeah.
They were not as advanced.
Right.
And so therefore we have it better. And it's like, they actually lived in harmony with nature.
Right.
And we have all of this technology and all of these luxuries that are beautiful and wonderful and make things arguably better in many ways, right? Like just
Right.
think about sanitation, running water, right?
Right.
But it's like, as a collective, we're not emotionally intelligent and awakened enough yet to be able to use them responsibly. They're
Right.
used as a tool for limiting and keeping people in a prison.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I love the word that you use, primitive, because I feel like we do tend to look at life as though it happens in a past, present, future succession, rather than kind of like what I kind of more so believe about life is like everything's kind of happening at once. Like time is a human made construct. And I kind of think that we are just going through different peaks and lows of consciousness. Like there's this book called The Synchronicity Code, where it focuses a lot on just human beings being cyclic beings and Earth being a cyclic being. And so rather than things happening in a succession, like we tend to believe that they do, that everything's happening all the time, and it's about energetic alignment and vibration. And so I think now that we are kind of in a more primitive state than ancient civilizations such as Egypt and the Mayas were back then, because there's so many things that they did that allude us to the fact that they're using energy in these ways that we don't understand for healing. And like we don't know how they built the pyramids. Like there's just so many things that suggest that they had a higher level of consciousness than we do now. And I kind of think we are starting to go kind of back into that peak of having a higher level of consciousness and existing in a more coherent way. Because like you said, like technology around us is advancing, but us as human beings inside, we're not evolving. We're not becoming closer with each other. If anything, we're becoming, more secluded and separated from nature, and losing that, that understanding that like we are nature and it is a part of us. Like we are taught to be so separate from it. And so it's just, we are just taught so many things that are so not good.
Yeah, I know. It's like the beauty about that is in that contrast, becoming aware of all these things makes the expansion so much sweeter.
Exactly.
In my perspective, it's like, if everything was just perfect unicorns and rainbows, it'd be kind of boring, you know? Not to say that I want contrast and struggle, but there is always something to appreciate in it.
100%. Like I read something once that was alluding to the fact that the darkness serves the light, that without having any kind of contrast in life, we'd be able to experience things, but not really have an understanding of it. And so I think in that way, like so many of the things that we do go through, like you said, is inching us towards expanding and evolving further. And without those things, that wouldn't happen. So in that way, something you may even perceive as a negative experience, it is gearing and evolving you towards a bigger understanding, which is then a positive experience. And so, everything in life is what we make it. We assign good and bad connotations to anything that we want to. And so, if I think that's a way that helped me not feel so overwhelmed and consumed by all the things going on in the world, is just having that perspective. Like everything is working towards a greater understanding, even if I can't understand it at this time.
Yeah. And something to kind of add on to that when talking about darkness and light, this is a perspective that, not everyone's going to agree with, and that's totally okay. But I personally don't perceive there being a force of evil. It's more like we live in a universe where love is the fundamental nature. The frequency of love is the highest vibration. So you can choose to ignore that. And that's what we see externally as, oh, this is an evil person, or this is a bad company, or this is destroying blah, blah, blah. Right. But it's not like there's some battle of forces. There's nothing to like fear.
Right. I know exactly what you're saying. And I completely agree with you. It's like, it's in the sense that like, I'm trying to think of a good example to kind of explain, like, okay, let's say a breakup, for example. Like, say you were with somebody and you love them, but it wasn't the best relationship for you, and you break up, and that breakup hurts. But out of that breakup, you grow and you learn more of what you want in a partner and more of who you are. And in that sense, in your next relationship, you are more aware of what you need, what you want. You can assert, or you can identify red flags faster. You just evolve more from that seemingly negative, hard experience. So in that way, it makes it a positive. I just think that more so we live in kind of a neutral universe, and we assign these connotations to things, because there are things that, you might hate pizza and I love pizza. So for you, pizza's bad. For me, pizza's good. Like, perspective is everything. And I think that's such a huge thing to just kind of put out into being a normal viewpoint of society, realizing that life is what you make it and what you perceive it to be. It's not being thrown at you as much as I guess, it is being thrown at you, but you can navigate through that rather than just having to accept all of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like a choose your own adventure,
Yeah,
like with
totally.
the example of a breakup. People can go through a breakup and refuse to expand, refuse to learn the lessons. And then that's how they find themselves in these repeating patterns of relationships.
Right. Same partner, different base.
Exactly. And it's not that like it had to be that way, because in each now moment, there's always a choice.
Yeah.
And the universe will continue presenting to you examples and opportunities for these lessons to integrate. Yes. But it's always your choice, because we have free will. So yeah,
I completely agree with that. Oh, I love this. I knew from your page, I was like, we have like such similar ideas and thoughts on life. And that's like my favorite thing to find. Like, not that I always need everybody to agree with me or even want that, just to have open conversations and like connect about things that are just kind of more taboo in society. For sure. As of, the past. It's just so much fun. Okay, so since we were talking about conditioning, I know that you touched on media and that being a big way in which we are conditioned. Are there any other kinds of ways that you feel like we are being conditioned in society, and what are your takes on why we are being conditioned?
Oh, yeah, that's a really big one. So, I mean, I guess just to maybe expand a little bit on the media thing. Yeah. Television by itself is a fantastic technology that could be used for such positivity. Right. But if you look at the roots of it, it's, television programming. And there are actual like patents and studies out there looking at how television and media can be used to program somebody's mind. Right. And this is used to fuel mindless buying behavior. Typically. Yeah. Or to influence a political outcome. So it's like we have this technology that could be so beautiful, but then it's being used for the purpose of like manipulation and control. Right. And then we have the same thing with our university system, like our education system. Yeah. I love the idea of free education. I love the idea of education in general, but from my perspective, how I see it being used is can be very damaging. So we have these textbooks that we're taught to learn from. And then when we learn these things, there's already something new out there. The science has evolved, whatever, there's like a next level. And then it's not designed to give people practical experience. The whole idea of public school was from many decades ago, when we still had factories and most people were factory workers, and it was to train people to be good little workers. Right. And school hasn't really evolved, beyond that. Right. Yeah, I could totally agree. Yeah. And as far as why, there are a lot of different perspectives that can be taken on this. So there are absolutely people and groups in what they perceive as power who want to keep that power. Yeah. And but it's not true power. Right. I like how you said that. Yeah. Yeah, it's actually force. Right. It's force and coercion, but it's mistake. Because leadership and being in true power, you do not have to manipulate, you do not have to coerce, you do not have to incentivize or control. You are the embodiment of something that other people naturally desire and flock to. Right. And so, I don't know how deep you want to go into that, but there's all
No, girl, we could go, because this is like I live for these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. I think school, media, those things are huge components. And I love what you said about, kind of the roots of why public schools started in the first place, to train people to be productive in the way that factories needed them to be, to grow and industrialize America. And so because something that I do sometimes is I'll go on YouTube, because they'll have like videos from like the 50s and the 40s of how they taught them and the things that they taught them. And it's so weird. It'll be stuff like teaching you how to spend your leisure time. And it was just such an area of them conditioning everybody how to behave. And I feel like they were able to get away with it in this way because so many people were uneducated at this time in the way that the people in power were educated. And so they were just kind of able to sneak in there and teach you whatever they want to teach you without you kind of really thinking of the fact that they're only telling you what they want you to know. We are not learning all of the information that exists out in the world for us to know, or that's important for us to know. We are knowing what they want us to know. And I feel like something that we don't really think about as much, and I think maybe people don't want to think about these kinds of things because it's kind of everywhere in your face that life isn't what we think it is or what we're being taught that it is. And we got to just keep this tunnel vision of trying to survive and thrive in society. We're so busy trying to survive that we're not really, most of us aren't thinking existentially about everything. Like they keep so many things classified from us. We know that. And they give us these excuses like, well, you couldn't handle it. It's for your protection or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, well, what do you mean? Because number one, if I can't handle it, you educate me. You create the education system that we all must go through. And so if I'm not educated enough to understand the politics or to understand what's going on in the world, that's kind of on you. So it's kind of like it all leads back somewhere. It's just most of us don't have the time to really decipher and go through it like that.
Yeah, because we're stuck in the machine, right?
Right.
And even going back before the 1940s, so the school system, the way that it was currently engineered and has carried through, was a product of the Great Depression, which was fear, right?
Right.
That was a product of the money system that we've created and the collapse of that.
Right.
And so if you kind of zoom out and look at that as contrast on the collective level, and I know I'm just talking about the US here, like there's so many other events and perspectives, right?
Right.
That could have been an opportunity for us to reassess and to rebuild something different.
Right.
But then instead it's like people sunk into fear, especially the fear of death. Right. And when you talk about this like cyclical nature, it's possible that the world's global population is not designed to just be constant and growing. You know, there's like ups and downs.
Right.
And death is not some horrible thing.
I know. Yeah. You know? I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah. And it's, I think the fear-based aspect that you were hitting on is a main reason why people stay in living in a lifestyle that's not actually fulfilling. Like almost every single person I know hates their job. If they won the lottery tomorrow, they would quit and they would be doing something completely different with their life. And I feel like that's just such a sign that it's like, why are we existing in this way that doesn't fulfill us or make us happy? It's because we are so afraid to do anything differently because this is all we've known. And we're also in a lot of ways fear-mongered into believing that this is the best way to do it. And that our leaders are so much smarter and brighter than us, and that they are running things in a way that we couldn't understand or whatever the case may be. You know, we are very indoctrinated into giving our power away, into wanting a savior, somebody to save us and to make everything okay for us, rather than learning how to have that independence and confidence within ourselves to know that anything that we want to do, we can do. Like everything around us today is created by people just like us. And so I don't know why we're letting these people tell us what to do, when how would you know what's best for me and how I should live my life? Like, how would you know that for me? You know?
Right. Exactly. And there's, I guess, one other thing that kind of came through about the way that we've been taught in the educational system. It's all very much external. Yeah. Like learn these external facts about life, right, rather than go within and discover something about your own inner world. Right. And then from that place, choose what you're curious about. Right. And learn from someone who is practicing that thing every day, not from a book.
Right. something I always say, like I always said, like in the future, whenever I have kids, like I would never want them to go to public school. And people are always like, well, how are they going to socialize? I'm like, I'm not going to keep them in the basement. I just don't want them to go through public school education. Like if we're going to learn about the French War, let's go to France. Like I just want to have, like, I want them to be able to learn for themselves, not to be talked at. I want them to be able to genuinely learn what they think and feel for themselves, and just be able to learn genuine history, because we've seen this time and time again that history books in different countries have a skewed representation of kind of what their opinion or perception of what happened in life is in that country, and it's different in so many different places. And Absolutely. So it's like, and that is one of the biggest things, is realizing that there are different facts in different countries for the same scenarios. I was like, hold on a minute, like let me do my own research here and really kind of figure out what's going on, because there's like an agenda that I think a huge part of it is encouraging their citizens to have that blind patriotism. Like something that we go through in the US is saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day from like kindergarten. Like I've been out of school for like 6 years and I still could recite that. And we got in trouble for not doing it. So it's like, that's a huge form of conditioning. And that's so weird.
That reminds me, there was, I think it was like my sophomore year of high school, the class that I had when we were supposed to say the Pledge of Allegiance, I just decided I didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. I have sort of I don't want to say problem, but I dislike authority in many forms. So
I feel it.
And the particular teacher who was teaching that period was super mad, like so offended. And, you know, they would just like send me to the principal's office over and over again. And the conclusion was, well, we can't force her to do it.
Right. Like, of course you can't. Like, it's kind of like a similar thing to like why we can't talk about religion in school. Like, if I have my own beliefs, why are you forcing me to say something that at the age when you're teaching me to do it, I don't even understand what this is. Yeah. I'm learning how to write my name, and you're also like forcing me how to say this Pledge of Allegiance. Like I'm pledging allegiance. I don't even know I'm doing that. Like, if you really like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm literally pledging allegiance to something that I have no idea why I'm doing that. I don't know. At that age, you don't know what this country stands for, what they're doing. And you're just being indoctrinated into like being cool with it anyway.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's scary. That's like huge. And like actually really nuts when you zoom out. Like you said, I love that. Mm-hmm. When you zoom out and like look at things from a different perspective, like we are just being conditioned into what they want us to be. And we're so busy in that we're not realizing that there's other ways to do it. And we're not realizing that that's not how it has to be. And we're so fearful that if we step out of it, we will get all these different repercussions that we see in society, like homelessness and whatnot, like we were talking about before. And I think a huge reason, like I love that you brought up that your teacher was mad at you, because that's what it was like. And I feel like where that kind of root comes from is because back then, like decades ago, people didn't have the freedom that we do now in a lot of different ways, or maybe they didn't feel like they had the freedom. People didn't speak up and, you know, about things like we do now. And I feel like that hits a nerve with people of older generations. It's like, well, why do you think you're different? Why do you think you don't have to say the pledge? Why don't you think you have to work a 9 to 5? I feel like it starts to mess with their validation of what life is. They're like, well, if you're doing it differently, it's like starts to churn a wheel. Could I have done it differently? And I think that just touches on a sore spot, because most of us have been just living a life that is miserable because that's what everybody else is doing. Everybody's conforming to this. And so I think it touches a nerve with older generations. And that's why I think a lot of them are like they're not really apt to want to hear us out or really understand. And some people are, but I get that, you know?
Yeah. And even that phrase, pledge allegiance, like what are you pledging your allegiance to in all aspects of your life? What stories are you buying into? Because that immediately creates a divide in your consciousness. It's kind of like, you know, the concept of like ideologies or groupthink. It becomes this divisiveness, like us versus them. If I pledge my allegiance to a 9 to 5, even if it makes me miserable, anyone else who breaks out of that is wrong. Right. And especially if they're having a good time doing it.
Right. And because especially I think the way that we are kind of taught is that well, the way that we tend to think is like if somebody has a different perspective or an opposing view than you, one of you has to be right and one of you has to be wrong, rather than having the greater understanding that we all have different perspectives of life. Every single one of us sees it a little bit differently, and we always will. We have this boundary where I can't become you and you can't become me, but we live in this collective reality together.
Mhm.
And so it's like, I feel like a greater way of looking at things, it's like if somebody does have an opposing perspective, take the time to try and understand their perspective. And then you'll have your own perspective. And overall, you'll have a greater understanding in general of whatever situation you're looking at. Like we just kind of try and point the finger too much. And because we are so divided. Like you said, we are taught to be. We are taught that to value, what's the word? We are taught to value people based off of how much money they have, what clothes they wear, what they look like. And that starts in school at a very, very young age, and even before then. But school is such a place that can foster an environment of competition and division. And I think that that's a huge component to public school today. I think that's a big part of it. Because what are we like, oh my God, what are we actually learning? Like, I feel like, okay, I learned English, I learned how to speak, but something my mom always says is like, you got kids almost master the human language, maybe not grammar wise or writing it out, but we know how to talk by age 5 or even before then. Like we are mastering one of the hardest languages at such a young age. And it's like, we don't need this system to teach and confine us on how to learn and what to learn. Like, because I didn't take much away from school. Like, I feel like I was just being taught at and learning how to memorize things rather than learning how to critically think or come up with my own conclusions, you know?
Yeah, that memorization is huge. I remember for almost every single exam that I would have in school, I would study for it like the night before or the morning of, because I was relying on my short-term memory, because it was a game.
Right.
They were just training us on recall, and it wasn't
seriously. Yeah.
And
it wasn't, do you understand this? Sorry.
No, it's fine.
It wasn't, do you understand this thing? It's, do you remember what the answer from the study guide was? Put that here on the test. Like, it's not, do you understand what's going on? You know what I mean? So I'm sorry to cut you off though. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I observed this even so I went to grad school for engineering, and I observed it even there at that level.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't quite as like rampant as in, you know, like high school or the first couple years of college, but it was still like, these are the types of problems, just do it. And none of it translated into the workplace.
Right. And I think and that's one of the things is like, especially in this day and age with the internet, which can be such a double-edged sword, but it's like anything that you can learn in a university or at school, you can learn on the internet for free with yourself. And so it's like, one of the things about society that kind of drives me crazy is that it's like they need to prove, like you have to have a degree or a piece of paper to prove you memorize the information they wanted you to memorize for you to be educated in some kind of subject, rather than like, that is actually not what I need to do at all. I think it's part of the control system. It's, you can't do what you want to do unless you do it our way. But I think that that's something that's starting to really change, especially with the boom of social media and people starting their own businesses. Like, I think we are starting to kind of realize as a collective, especially the younger generations, like we can do whatever we want. Like they say this is one way to do it, and this is how they suggest that we do it and how our parents did it. But it's like, this is one way to do it. And if this doesn't work for me, why am I doing this? What's the point? Like,
I see that exact concept translated into the coaching industry specifically. So there's a lot of newer coaches who think they need a certification, who think they need to take a certain course or to prove their worth via some piece of paper, something.
Right.
When the level beyond that is embodiment. So you can learn all of the information in books, on the internet, YouTube, everything, like everything that I teach or that I guide my clients through. The difference is that when you're having a conversation, the energy can actually transfer.
Right.
You know, the words can land in a way that integrates.
Right.
That's the only thing that you're paying for. And it's a totally different approach to adding value, because we're so indoctrinated to think that value comes from the degrees that we have, the certifications, the years of experience.
Right.
And that's true in a certain paradigm, but that is not the truth.
Right. It's not the full and total spectrum of it all. Like there's just so many in-betweens and so many different ways to discover and learn and expand and evolve. And when we are being so constricted into one way of doing it, there inevitably so many people get left behind because that's not in the way that they learn. That's not the way that they thrive. And then those people have this concept of themselves like they aren't good enough because society hasn't caught up with the fact that everybody doesn't learn the same, everybody doesn't express and create the same. There's nothing wrong with us. There's something wrong with society and the way that it's set up and the way that it's built and the way that we are taught to go through it. And it's so unfair that if we don't thrive in their specific paradigm, that we take that on ourselves, like we aren't good enough in some way.
Yeah, so there's a couple of points that are coming through that this is so good. I love this.
Oh, me too.
So what you said about the like feeling not good enough, it kind of comes back to that competition piece, right? When we are taught to be in this like us versus them mode,
right?
Or like, you know, how many gold stars can I accumulate to prove my worth? That inherently disregards the magic of the individual human.
Yes.
Because consciousness is not redundant. Like, we're not clones. We each have a slightly different perspective, a slightly different take on things. We each have a unique gift and a unique way that we're going to share that. And I think that if that was really emphasized more, then we wouldn't have these problems with like, or as many with things like, you know, depression or low self-esteem or feeling like I'm not enough or I can't do it.
Right.
Because if you knew at your core, if your self-concept was that I am magic, like I am here for a reason and I have something that no one else can offer.
Right.
That, you know, that's not ego. That is acknowledging your worth as a human being. And that allows you to see the worth in others too. So when you see someone who has more followers than you on Instagram in half the amount of time, you're not going to go and say, well, that means I'm not good enough. You're going to say, good for you. Like this is your unique expression, your unique path.
Right.
And I think so the other piece to this was when thinking about these systems or these conditioning things, you know, ways that we've been indoctrinated, whatever, the first sort of layer is to get kind of pissed off. Like, I'm really mad that this exists. Like, screw this. I'm against this. You know, this is bad. Like you even use the word unfair. There's a lot of that, right?
Right.
Even in that acknowledgement, that is still feeding the system. Yeah. And it's not like a bad or wrong place to be in.
Right.
But I think eventually there comes a point when like moving out of that is going to be focusing on, okay, what do I want to create? How can I lead myself? And how can I be the embodiment of the reality I wish to experience? Totally. Everyone else can go and do their own thing. Like I acknowledge there are systems that have decades, hundreds of years of momentum behind them. Like I'm not going to try to fight against or whatever. I'm just going to pave my own way and focus on that only.
Right. I love that. And because I feel like with what you said about those feelings that we have of feeling like that things are unfair or having so much anxiety and depression, like I think that these are normal human emotions that we would experience on the spectrum regardless of what society we live in. But I think that the societal structure emphasizes these things because we are living in a misalignment with who we truly are, a misalignment with nature. We see that all around us. Nature is screaming at us that we are not doing things the right way. And so when we are so out of alignment, we are so inauthentic within ourselves, of course anxiety and depression and unhappiness is going to be heightened. And that's something that I'm super passionate about getting across to the collective, is that like the structure that we are living in is not built for us. That's why we are miserable. And so we have to let that crumble and build something else. Because something that I've been seeing in videos on TikTok and something that people have been talking about is empires falling. That there are these empires that at some point hundreds of years ago were so huge, like the Roman Empire, etc., that eventually fell and a whole new empire society was created. Like it is not a crazy thing for a system that is no longer working or outdated to crumble and fall and to create something else. It's scary because it's the unknown and our bodies are literally trained to fear the unknown, to keep us safe. It's, you know, it goes into so many different instincts that we have, but it's like, there is I feel like we miss the beauty of evolving and change and transformation because we are so taught to cling to this version of life because it benefits the people that have created this perspective and this narrative of life.
Yeah. I mean, what you just described is like the birth and death cycle that
Yeah.
we're so afraid of on an individual level,
Right.
like on a societal level.
Yeah.
And then just like clinging to, when an individual is convinced that they must live a certain way in order to survive, they are completely giving up their sovereignty.
Right.
And so, of course, you're going to look outside of you for some reassurance, for some safety in the, the 401k, the pension plan, the 3 weeks vacation if you're lucky, right?
Right.
Like you're going to look to some authority figure to tell you how to live and how to be because you're so focused on that fear of the unknown.
Right. And that's one of the things too that is kind of scary is that we have been trained to not panic or think anything is going wrong or to want to change anything unless somebody of authority tells us that needs to happen. Like I think it was like almost 2 years ago now when the California and the Amazon was on fire like crazy. And we were just all going to work as normal. Like some of our biggest living ecosystems, the Amazon wasn't in trouble on fire. And so it's like, because somebody in authority wasn't like, hey, something's wrong, we were acting as if everything was okay. Yes, we were getting coverage on the news of what was going on, but the Amazon burned for weeks. And it's like we were just all going to our 9-to-5 office jobs as if that matters. You know what I mean? Like the world was literally burning and we are just continuously going into these buildings when most of the jobs are made out of convenience. There are a lot of jobs within society that are so beneficial and that we need, like doctors and nurses, but like other jobs that are just out of convenience and consumerism, like fast food places and shopping malls, like most of the jobs I feel like we work today are not necessary. And so it's like, why are we wasting our time doing things that aren't moving us forward? And I'm all about indulging in fun things like shopping and those kinds of things, but just not on the scale in which we are kind of taught these things are important because of this consumeristic society that we are so pushed into continuing.
Yeah. And so, I mean, absolutely no disrespect when I say this to anyone listening, watching you, anyone. When you said jobs that are so necessary, like doctors and nurses, I immediately went to, well, that's become a business. That's become an industry. So people go into that with the pure intention of, I want to help, I want to heal. And then it's, oh, well, you're going to get some bonuses from a pharmaceutical company if you push these opioids or this, whatever. And it's the intention is completely lost in the industry.
They've kind of consumerized everything. Like you can't really get away from it in this country because capitalism, money runs everything. And so the people that are creating these corporations and that are, in charge of the medical system and all these other systems, they are looking to make a profit. Like the thing about capitalism is that there always needs to be somebody on the top and somebody on the bottom. It's a hierarchy system. And so the people that are at the top are trying to stay there and they're trying to keep you at the bottom because that's how the system works. There has to be people on the bottom. And so and like, and what you were saying too, like, because westernized medicine is so, I won't say it's so off. Like my mom is an RN personally. And so I get a little bit of an insight of the medical field in that way, but in some of my own spiritual understandings about healing and, using food and natural medicines and just how Western medicine kind of opposes those ideals, whereas like, as though that they call it alternative medicine. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I know.
Like, and it's like, no, that's the baseline. Like that is the first medicine. It's not alternative, babe. Western medicine is alternative. And so there's just so many things that I love the way that you said it. Like these things are a business. These natural things that are a part of life have been consumerized and we are taught to look at them in a very, in such a way that we are separate from it when these are things that are a part of us, but because they become industrialized and part of a business, it's separating us from that and separating us from our true nature and really understanding those things.
Yeah. And if people were not stuffing their physical vessels with processed fast food, sitting in front of a screen for hours a day, mindlessly scrolling,
Right.
taking their prescription meds to regulate the chemicals in their brain, and being sedentary, we would not need as big of a healthcare industry.
Right. And I think it's a huge thing once you connect the dots that the big corporations that for the most part own the Western medicine way of doing things, own a lot of the corporations that are giving you the news, that are creating those TV shows, right? So, because what is it, like 10 companies or corporations own almost everything that we use in America. And I think in the world, but I have, the information that I know most about is America because that's where I'm at. But
right.
like, it's just, once you start doing the research and connecting the dots, you see that the people that like are pretending to come up with these solutions for the diseases you have are creating the foods in which that are perpetuating and giving you these diseases. Like once you start doing the research, you can't unsee it. It's everywhere. I think most people are just too afraid to go there because I think most people have that inclination something's up. Like one of the best ways I've ever heard it, an analogy, is it's like a splinter in your mind. You don't know what's going on, but something isn't quite right here. But most people just stuff it down because they got to pay their bills and they got, you know what I mean? They have so many other things going on. They can't stop for a second to really think about it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was actually, that might've been the video on TikTok that connected us. Because I remember showing there's like a web of like those 10 companies and like all of the other companies that they own.
Yes.
It's, and then it's been called a conspiracy theory, right? Maybe not that directly because you can do the research and see the proof, right?
Right.
But going off on any sort of like making a conclusion from that,
right?
It's labeled as you're crazy. This is a conspiracy theory.
Right.
And so people don't want to be associated with that. They don't want to talk about it. And then there's so much, censorship on social media and on the news.
Right.
Like,
and it's so, and I think that people kind of more so want to believe that everything important that we need to know we're being told, even though it's so out there that, again, they're classifying and hiding so much information. And something that you just said, reminded me, I wrote it down. It reminded me of the Matrix and the Agent Smiths. Like have you ever seen the Matrix?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so how it's like everybody in society is conditioned and indoctrinated into being a certain way. And those of us that start to kind of wake up and kind of be like, hey, let's like look into this a little more. Let's talk about these things. Let's do the research. And we're called conspiracy theorists, which it drives me nuts when you can't call me a conspiracy theorist when there's facts behind what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Like I have hi, look at it, babe. Like I have it here. But it's like, I also get the fear of like me bringing up these certain things about, how society isn't exactly what we think it is, or how we are being conditioned for an agenda or a certain narrative to play out. That is interrupting your entire version of what you think reality is, of what you think life is, and of who you think you are. So I understand that fear and wanting to reject and push that away. I've experienced that with a lot of people in my own life where they're just like, okay, CIERA, like you might have validity, but I'm not ready to talk about this yet. And I'm just like, I understand that because it's scary when you don't have an understanding of the why they're doing it, of the fact that we are so powerful that they have to condition us into feeling and believing that we're small so that we don't rise up and do what we want to do, because their whole thing is that control, and us not knowing who we are and what we're capable of and everything that comes with the human experience. That's a part of it. Like when you don't know your power, you can be manipulated into giving it away.
Yeah. And I'm not even convinced that, the people who are, we could call it at the top or in false power or whatever. Yeah. I'm not even convinced that they know what they are doing. So for example, you look at like recent politics in the United States, like the most recent election, both candidates thought that they were right. It was not like one was sitting there like, I have an evil agenda to screw the entire world. No, they both thought that they were right. So I think that something that is kind of, it's been hard for me to accept, and it's a little bit trippy, especially if you're in this like spiritual path. Human beings have the power to manipulate energy and matter at a very large scale and not be spiritually awake.
Yes.
That's like what?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
that's true. And even more fundamental than that is that all states are allowed.
Right.
There is no right or wrong, good or bad here. Like there's contrast. There are emotions that we experience when we hear news of events or whatever that feel bad in our bodies.
Right.
But consciousness divided itself in this way to experience the full spectrum.
Right.
Because
Yes.
there's expansion in everything. Expansion in everything.
Yes,
whether
totally.
It's good or bad,
Yes, I could not agree with you more. So going back to just explaining a little bit for maybe other people that don't have the understanding is of kind of what we're talking about. So like for me personally, I believe that we are spiritual beings I believe that we're spiritual beings having a temporary human experience, and we are the universe experiencing itself. And that the base kind of everything is consciousness and energy, and that is creating everything. Because what I have learned is that the basis of matter is energy. Matter is an energetic vibration, vibrating at a certain rate, and you are experiencing this computer as a computer because of its vibration and how your vibration is experiencing that vibration. Matter is a physical construct that has an underlying base of energy, as everything does. And so the physical world is quite literally an illusion in that way. Yes. And I know that that's a hard concept to come across for a lot of people, but it's like something I always suggest is to tell people to read that CIA document, The Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process. Have you read that?
No, I'm writing it down.
Oh, girl, I need you to read that. Because we have to talk about that. Okay. Because it talks about how we live in an energy hologram, how these scientists, paid for by the CIA or whatever, they were doing studies on how to attain higher levels of consciousness. Yeah. And in doing that, they were trying to understand the fabric of the universe. And they talk about something called the absolute, which is like an infinite consciousness. It's like this consciousness and this creator, this being that we cannot quite fathom in this realm and then this experience. Because once you try and start thinking about it, you're like, oh my God, like the thing that gets me is like, what was first, the woman or the egg? Like conversations like this, it's like, oh my God, like that like makes my brain hurt. And because I think there are just certain things we can't quite understand as human beings that are just maybe too outside of our realm of current consciousness. Maybe we'll get there as we evolve. I don't know. But there are things that I think are above our realm of understanding. And so we have tried to create an understanding of what we think life is to have some kind of validity to what we are doing here. And I think that that's something that people kind of misunderstand, but it's purposely we're taught to misunderstand it. We are taught that this is how you do it. This is what life is. We are kind of so wrapped up in on how big of a purpose we have. Because I think as human beings, we want to understand what we are doing here, why we're here, and we want to feel like we have a purpose. And I believe that we do. I just think that sometimes wanting to have that validation can lead you down a path that is more inauthentic to you, just so that you can feel like you have a firm understanding of what's going on, even though we might not be able to understand it, and you have to be comfortable with that, but it's hard to be comfortable with that.
Definitely. And like, we exist in this dimension. There are other dimensions beyond this one. This has been, many, if you want to look at the spirituality or the science of it, you can find, proof or theories or validity to that perspective.
Right.
And we have these brains, which are the lens through which consciousness is expressed. And so our brains are inherently limited. Right. There's only so much that can come through the filter. There's only so much data that can come through our system at once before it overloads.
Yeah.
And that's, when you talked about the, this reality being a hologram or like an illusion, that concept can mess with so many people's minds.
Yeah.
And, this is not meant to cause any like, what is the term, derealization or anything like that. If someone's not ready to hear that perspective, then just forget about it,
Right. 100%.
But I guess, can I go into a little bit of like the quantum stuff for a minute for people who want to kind of know more about that?
Yes, please.
So maybe you're familiar with this as well. So there was something that was done called the double slit experiment.
Okay, I haven't heard of this.
Yeah. So these essentially what happened is that electrons were passed through double slits and then measured on this screen, right?
Okay.
So the conclusion from this experiment, without going into all the details, was that the electron was only a particle once it was observed. And when it was not observed, it was a waveform.
Yes. Okay.
So when you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the building blocks of what make us up, like what matter actually is,
right.
we have particles, 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 physical, solid, and then a wave.
Right.
And then like 99.9% space.
Right.
That makes up this physical thing.
Right.
And so if we know so far that the fundamental building blocks of what we perceive as a physical reality is only physical once it's focused on by consciousness.
Oh my God.
And after that, it's a wave. So when I say wave, what that means is infinite possibilities, right? Because a wave is not static, it's always moving.
Right.
There's
always energy, right?
That it could take.
Right.
And then the particle is a fixed state that is one singular expression of that wave that contains the infinite possibilities.
Right.
And then there's this other concept in physics. It's
I loved how you explained that.
Yeah, so it's what was called dark energy. Okay. Might be that or dark matter. And I don't know the up-to-date research. This might be an outdated term, but essentially what was found was that our universe, like space, is composed mostly of this.
Right.
So it's essentially energy that cannot be characterized physically.
Right.
And how I immediately went to interpret that, which, this could be correct, incorrect. It's neither here nor there. It's just an idea.
Right. We're not experts. We're just.
Right.
Right.
This is unrealized physical potential.
Right.
So, and then this kind of gets into law of attraction, law of assumption, manifestation. But through the deliberate focus of your consciousness, you can create physical experiences in the hologram of your personal reality.
Right. Oh my God.
Nothing in the universe is fixed. It's only fixed once we focus on it.
Right. And even then it's an illusion of being fixed, because once you're not looking at it anymore, it's no longer fixed. Yeah. And so I love that explanation, because I think a good way to kind of think about it for people that this is kind of a lot for, right off the bat, if you've never really started doing research into this kind of stuff, I get why people kind of eyes glaze over, what the hell are you talking about? So, but because it's so interesting though, once you go into it, it's it all starts to make sense and connect. And so when you think about it in the sense that everything for us, if you think of it in our own physical bodies, everything that we do starts in our mind first. Everything that we bring about, all our thoughts, beliefs, and perceptions, we can observe the outside world, but the way that we interpret and understand it all gets filtered through our own lens. Yeah. Anything that's been created by any human being started first as a thought and an idea in their mind, as this intangible, non-physical thing that then you can bring into the universe and create into a physical, tangible thing. And so I think that understanding of that the baseline of everything is energy and waves and light, which is just forms of energy, it helps you understand further that we are not just these bodies. Life isn't just this physical thing. There's so much more to it. That it's such a disservice that we are taught that what's physical and what's tangible is the only thing that's real. We are taught that so much, when in reality, there are so many things around us that are happening right now that our physical bodies cannot perceive. That's been proven time and time again. Yes. A great example is things that are so tiny on microscopes, we can't see them with the naked eye, so we need microscopes to see them. Doesn't mean that those things don't exist. We just cannot perceive them in these bodies. There's so much more to life than just what we have been taught. And if we take the time to divulge into that, it blows your freaking mind. And then you have a better grasp and understanding on how to manifest and control the specific life that you want for yourself.
Absolutely. And I mean, even just looking at, the spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, visible light is a teeny amount of the whole thing. My dog is laying down on the floor next to me, has a nose that is 600 times more sensitive than mine. There's a whole range of senses that as humans, we cannot directly physically experience.
Right.
So to say we even know the absolute truth of everything that's going on out there is, it's impossible. I mean, all we can do is go within, do our own research, come to our own conclusions, and be open-minded enough to let that evolve.
Yes.
Not be so clenched to a doctrine or so defensive about our beliefs, you know?
100%.
And there's another, I don't know if you've heard of this analogy or example. It's something that I heard a while ago on, it was like a, gosh, I can find the exact source. It was some like physics, like popular science type show. And then I kind of expanded on it. But if you imagine a, like a pond, right? And look at the surface of the water. And now imagine that just that surface of the water is the world. So we have a 2-dimensional world.
Right.
And there are little fishies that happen to just exist on this one plane. So 2-dimensional fish. Well, in the world that we experience in the higher dimension, imagine it starts raining and you have this one 3-dimensional drop that hits this 2D surface of the water. So how these little 2D fishes are going to experience the 3-dimensional drop is in a series of states. As that drop hits and the waves ripple out, one state, one state, one state, one state. Now, you could make an argument that those 2-dimensional fish would experience the movement of that drop as time. But from our perspective, what we see is this is just a physical drop of water.
Right.
And we perceive something else as time.
Right.
So what even is time?
Right. What even is all of it? Because we genuinely all have a little bit of a different viewpoint. And that's like something that I was touching on earlier, is if we, rather than trying to point the finger and you're right, I'm wrong, if we like put all of our perspectives together, we could have such a bigger understanding by now of what life is in general. Like, somebody that I love is Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, I'm obsessed with this man. He is just somebody that married he married spirituality and science for me. And I think that is one of the keys for us moving forward in our evolution in humanity, because there's so many things in science that we can't physically explain, that if we go into a spiritual, energetic understanding of things, that it does give us a better explanation or understanding, or just at least adds to it. And I think that's just such an important viewpoint. And it's just unfortunate that so many of us are so opposed to, because I don't know if it maybe has to do with religion or faith in general, because there is a component to faith within spirituality, to just trusting that what resonates for you and what you are finding is a right on some level. We all have to have some type of factual basis we go back to and that we agree with, whether or not, like, because there's like anything that we experience in this life, there really are no facts. There are things that we've come to understand as facts, to identify with as facts, but those are facts based upon our conscious understanding of them. And these things are bigger than just our conscious understanding and perspective of them. So the way that we're perceiving it is not it in its entirety. It's only a portion of everything. And so there's just, oh my God, I could just talk about this forever. Like, there's just so much more to life. And I can't wait. I'm like really grateful and excited to be somebody that wants to like share this with the world and just grow and learn together, and just evolve more into a bigger understanding of what the hell everything is and what's going on.
I know, it's such a gift.
Yes.
It really is.
Seriously.
Like that openness and that curiosity.
Right.
And there was something I wanted to say about science. So in every now moment, science is always incomplete. And if you want, you could say that science is always wrong, if you use that terminology.
Right.
I mean, think about the evolution. There's always more and more and more discoveries to be made. So for those listening who may be so deeply anchored in the truth of science, and using that as their God, so to speak, there's always going to be more. Right.
Truth is subjective to your perspective. And if you are not somebody that gives yourself the space to have an open mind and to let new information in, you are going to just be regurgitating the same experiences and understandings you have your entire life. And that's
Yeah.
not growth, that's stagnancy. And it's like, we are so comfortable in our, like, that's what comfort zones kind of are. We get this idea of what life is, of what we are, and that feels safe, whether or not it makes us unhappy or unfulfilled or not. We at least know what we're going to expect. And that is one of the defense mechanisms of the brain to keep us safe. It's like, no, stay here. This is what we know. Like, literally, our bodies and our brains reject new information to an extent, from a fearful place of like, well, I don't really know where that's going to take me, so I don't know if we should do that. But that, I like to think of it though, like, rather, or I'd like to like kind of give the analogy, like, you don't have to think about that feeling of, because so when we have something that's opposing to a viewpoint that we had before, we kind of sometimes get this feeling in our gut, like a fearful kind of like, well, hold on a minute. And so rather than taking that gut feeling as like, no, something's wrong, I need to retreat back into my comfort zone, you can take it as a sign that your body and your brain is rewiring and reconditioning itself to have to include this new understanding, and then to put it all together and give yourself a bigger, greater understanding of whatever situation that you were, looking at in general.
Yeah. And if you adopt the perspective that we came here into this physical experience to uncover our fullest expression of power, of true power.
Yes.
Then it would make sense that we are designed with these tools, our brains, that are literally physically wired to trick us into thinking that expansion is scary, because that necessitates the conscious application of our free will over a period of what we call time, right? It's going to be in a moment. You must persist if you wish to expand. And that kind of makes the whole process that much more rewarding. It's like, oh my gosh, I figured it out. Like, I am not just this little drone who's meant to work in a factory or in an office or whatever,
Yeah. And it makes it more authentic too. Like, something that is talked about a lot is like the amnesia that we kind of get when being born into this plane, for people that do believe we are spiritual beings having a human experience, that amnesia serves the purpose of having a genuine, authentic experience. If you already knew that this was, just for a period of time, that you are a spiritual, eternal being, that you are so much more than this physical vessel, why would you take life seriously? Why would you know what I mean? Why would you take the time to go through all of these experiences that can feel so taxing, like breakups and, births and deaths and all of these different things? Like, why would we go through those if we knew that it wasn't for real? Because it's like, we wouldn't take the time to genuinely engulf ourselves in this experience, to also have the other experience of growing and evolving. Like, all of the things that we go through, good or bad, like, all of those things are growing and evolving us into our next state of being an expansion. And so we need all of it to move further. And for me, I think the only thing that follows us after death in this life, which I think is just a transmutation of energy and a transformation, what follows us is the lessons that have become ingrained within our consciousness, within our soul, from what we've experienced here. And so oh my God, I love it. Like, it can be so overwhelming and kind of daunting, because it's such a different perspective than what we were taught and that what we learned. But if we were taught these kinds of things from day one, like in school, if these are the kinds of things that we learned about, it wouldn't be so scary. It wouldn't be so taboo or left field. The only reason that it seems that way to the majority of us is because we have been taught such an opposite understanding, like, and such a controlled, conformed understanding. Like, we are not given the room to expand that consciousness, especially when we're growing up. Our most formative years are spent in a concrete building being talked at for most of our time, for most of our lives. So we don't have that experience of truly discovering for ourselves. And so it's wild.
And I mean, I am so grateful every single day for all of that. Looking back on my years in school, and then what I chose to put myself through with going to grad school and just being in this state of stress and anger. Like, anger used to be my dominant emotion.
Right.
And I can't even connect back to that time, even though it was just a few years ago, really.
Right.
But all of it makes this now moment so much more satisfying.
Right.
So
Right.
I've come to an understanding that the true satisfaction and fulfillment, and what you might want to call like freedom in this life experience, is having that awakening to who you really are.
Right.
And having that innate curiosity to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the layers of yourself.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter, you know, like when I first started in business, my goal was to just make money. And I looked on the internet, you know, read all the things, took the courses, hired the coaches, whatever, to teach me the framework to make money. And I realized after all of that, why do I still feel approximately the same as I did when I was in my 9 to 5? Because there was this other piece that was missing. So it's not even about any of the external things. Like, yeah, of course I want to have a nice home and drive a nice car and wear the clothes I want to wear. Sure. But that's not what brings me that sense of inner peace.
Right. It can aid you in that sense of inner peace,
Sure.
but it's not what's going to fulfill you and keep you in a state of continuing and feeling in that place. I mean, we see it all the time, and I think that's something in society that gets misconstrued. Like, we look at celebrities and rich people as if they have it all, so they can't be sad or they can't go through anything. And it's like, I think those people have more of an understanding that these things do not buy you happiness. Like, I have all of these things, and I'm telling you, like, I'm still sad, I'm still depressed, I'm still all of this. But I think we are in such a state of wanting to believe that once we attain that car, that house, that dollar amount, that we'll be happy. We don't want to listen to them, because it's like, no, that's what I'm working towards. So how can you tell me once I get there, I'm not going to be satisfied as society's been telling me I'm going to be?
Yeah.
And so all of it is kind of such a trap in that way. We are taught to search outside of ourselves from what we need from within. We'll never feel completely content or happy unless that's coming from an inside place. It's an inside job. All of it is just like, you know, and it even goes back to tying into that everything kind of starts in the mind. Everything starts from within, all of it, all of creation, all the feelings. And so to learn how to control and to make your brain and your body work in a cohesive state that's going to allow you to get and gravitate towards what you want, that is the goal. That's everything. Something we are taught to kind of push away the inside feelings. Your emotions don't really mean anything. You're being over dramatic or whatever. We are taught to push and hide those things rather than to explore and, you know, build on them.
I love how you put all of that, and that brings up, this is going to be so good. So even within, there can be a phase of like, once you've understood, okay, it's really within, it's the inner game. That's my focus here. And then you almost like reject the physical. It's like, well, I don't want the nice house. I don't want the nice car. I don't want these things because that's wrong, or that's separate from this inner work. When really, I think this is just a big part of my philosophy, is that we can have it all.
Agreed.
Like, have the, you know, the inner peace, that sense of inner freedom, that knowing yourself, that awakening to who you really are. And these material luxuries, you know, and work with technology. It's like, it comes back to that point of like, we have all this technology, but as a collective, we're not emotionally intelligent and awake enough to be able to use it in a way that is productive or helpful or expansive. But I believe that as, you know, as more people have conversations just like this one, and this kind of work in the world, we will be able to calibrate to that, where it's like, there isn't going to be, you know, this hierarchy of like people needing to be at the bottom. Maybe we will develop technology where it's like entirely robots or artificial, where it's like all of that, you know, so-called like grunt work that I don't really believe that anyone is passionate about doing. All of that can be outsourced because we have the technology. And then eventually as a collective, we'll be free to, like, really, truly free to pursue the things that are just creative, just passionate, you know, expansive.
That are like innate within us, because it's like, we all have this, I think, these innate instincts and feelings and nudges towards what's right for us and what's not. And it's just when society comes in with this game plan and this blueprint of sorts that we must go through, we feel as though we don't have the freedom to really do that. Like what you were saying about how we kind of all we feel like there's this kind of scarcity, like there's only a certain amount of people that can live out their dreams or can have what they want, because we are kind of taught that. We are taught that the safest thing to do is to work a 9 to 5, like how you were saying with your art. Like people try and talk you out of doing what you're passionate about if in society it can't make you enough money. But the thing is that there is enough for all of us. We're just taught that there isn't. There is no scarcity. It's just for the system that this narrative is built on to continue and to work, there has to be people on the bottom doing that grunt work. And the truth is that once we learn how to create that equilibrium within ourselves and that coherence between our minds and our hearts, like we can all create and manifest the life of our dreams, every single one of us. Like you said, there does not need to be this hierarchy system where there are people on the top and people on the bottom. That is an agenda and a narrative that is currently working for the people that have created it. And I won't pretend to know all about that, but there are people that have created this structure that works and benefits them. It is not working and benefiting all of us. And so that hierarchy it's a narrative that does not have to stay a narrative. We keep perpetuating it because it's all that we know. But once we learn how to control our inner world, we control our outer world. We can all learn how to manifest the lives that we want. We just have to learn and understand how to do that, how to uncondition ourselves from what society has indoctrinated us into and recondition ourselves.
I love that you said condition, because that was literally like what I was going to bring up. So perfect synchronicity there.
Beautiful.
Because there's when thinking about, there's enough for all, like there's no scarcity.
Right.
Some people may make the argument, well, not all 9 billion people on the planet can have their own yacht and private island. But here's the thing about that. When you peel back the layers of conditioning, of what you're supposed to want, who you're supposed to be, we do not all have the same desires.
Right.
This goes back to the point of consciousness is not redundant.
Right.
Not all 9 billion people on the planet want their own yacht and private island.
Right.
Like that may seem hard to believe for those people who do desire that level of like luxury and physical possessions. But then even among that group of people who desire that, there's a portion who only think they desire it because of their conditioning.
Right.
And then another point that came up, and this is so beautiful, is this idea of everyone can do it. Like everyone can create their dream life. Everyone has it within them to be completely free and sovereign. Right. Because if I believe that for myself, like if I really believe that for myself, I must believe it for everyone else.
Right.
And if I don't believe it's possible for everyone else, then there's a part of me that doesn't think it's possible for me.
Right. And that's a really beautiful point where when people talk about, how you feel and react to the world is a reflection of you, and how other people react to you is a reflection of them. Like everybody really is operating based off of their own internal feelings, even and kind of projecting them out into the world. Like if somebody's treating you badly, they're feeling bad inside. And that can be something that's a little bit hard to kind of understand because it feels personal, but it's not personal to you. Like we are all, experiencing and living life through our own lens. And so all people have to go off of is that internal, what's going on inside. So if they're having an internal struggle, that's going to be projected outwards. And so if you're in that space, you're going to kind of get the brunt of that. But just realizing that doesn't, how other people act and react has nothing to do with you. Like if you're being rude to somebody, them reacting, in a defensive way isn't crazy, but they could also be somebody that does not care that you're acting in a certain way and that they keep themselves cool, calm, and collected. Like how somebody reacts is always about them, and how somebody acts is always about them. And something else that like I really loved is like that we were talking about, like the manifestation, how we can all have, like we really create as we go. Like we were talking about, the physical world isn't all there is. It's not as physical or solid or as I have a word it's not as
fixed.
Yes. Yeah. It's not yes, it is not as fixed as we are taught that it is. We can change and manipulate it at any time. Like we are these energetic beings at our core, and everything around us is an energetic vibration at its core. And so we are always working together to create this experience, us with the universe around us. And so like there's always enough, because we are always creating our experience anyway. Like if we are living in this, which I do believe, this this hologram of sorts, this energetic hologram, I believe that our consciousness is projecting this reality, and that everything happening right now is just a projection of a possibility within the universe. Like this is real right now, but it's a projection and an illusion of a perspective of life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so like in that way, the physical world is always being created by us, by our internal memory. So there will always be enough space for everybody, always be enough for everybody. Like the thoughts of overpopulation is something that I just don't really agree with. And maybe if I were to do more research on it, maybe I could see a point of it. But my whole thing is that we might be overpopulated. For example, people think that cats and dogs are overpopulated, especially cats. And it's like, are they overpopulated, or are we just building these huge structures on the land that they would use to live on? Like everywhere you go, there's a Starbucks, a McDonald's, a concrete building that is taking up and taking away from the natural world in which these animals would survive. Like, why do you think that it's our job to put a cap on how many animals are born, or how many babies or people are born? You know what I mean? Like life is going in this cycle all the time. And I feel like nature is not creating more than it can handle, but we are creating this structure in which we are confining nature in. We are trying to confine how it grows and evolves, because that's not fitting the agenda that's not fitting the agenda of the narrative that is currently being pushed within our society.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, nature will always regulate itself.
Agreed. Right.
It's more intelligent than we can even conceive of.
Right.
If you look at genetics, DNA, the information that is passed down, like that's not something that human beings could have designed themselves in this physical form.
Totally.
And then there was this other idea that kind of popped into my mind of, what I'm experiencing right now. It's like my house, and then maybe some parts of the city I live in, and then maybe some parts of nature.
Yeah.
I don't have a conscious awareness of the entire world.
Right.
And so when you talk about this, reality isn't fixed and it's always changing.
Right.
No one really knows what's actually happening in the world.
Right.
Because
it's
our
just their perspective of it.
Yeah, like our consciousness can't even go there.
Right. I love that perspective. That's so interesting. And something too that I was thinking about while we were talking about this kind of thing is, which is a little off topic, but just talking about how we are so indoctrinated into and conditioned into this way of living. We think that, and I think a big part of why this indoctrination and conditioning works is because we are being conditioned that we are free, that this is what freedom looks like, and this is what freedom is. And it's not at all. Like the way that I kind of tend to think about it is, so all of us are working these jobs to make and attain money, right? And so money is that conduit that we are using to attain freedom. But so money is not actually what you're chasing. Freedom is what you're chasing, and you're using money to do it. So if freedom is something that you have to seek, it's not something you already have. That's something we work for every single day. Like we might be freer than other countries, but overall, we are not as free as we've been taught that we are. We've just been conditioned into thinking that this is what freedom is, when it isn't. This is an artificial version of reality that's just all that we've ever known.
Yeah. And freedom is a state of being.
Right.
Not something that is a byproduct of external circumstances. And what you said, like, I heard this come through, free as a limit. So when you talked about being conditioned into believing that this is freedom,
right,
we have been almost like on a systematic level manipulated into believing that a limitation is free.
Right.
So weird.
It's because it's just that, and I think that just really alludes to the fact of how how we can be so conditioned into thinking things are what they aren't, or thinking that they are what they aren't.
Yeah.
Like the people that have created the rules, regulations, the policies, the social structures, they get to decide what we know and how we learn it. And when they get to manipulate the information that you know, they get to manipulate your perceptions and your beliefs, manipulating your decisions and your choices. And so it's just, there's so much that goes into not questioning what is being handed down to you, the information that you're experiencing in the world around you. And it's a taboo thing to question authority, and it shouldn't be at all. And that's, I think, a huge part of the conditioning. No, we should be questioning the people that are creating the lives that we are living, the blueprint for the lives that we are living. We should absolutely be questioning every single inch of that.
Yeah.
Always.
And then if you think about this from a perspective of manifestation, like creating the illusion that you perceive as real in your own perspective, right?
Right.
If we have these systems in place that essentially promote an intense emotion of fear and worry and stress.
Right.
So like from the news, it's all doom and gloom, worst case scenario, you know, from a lot of social media is based in comparison. So feeling like you're not enough. This whole like system or game, as I like to call it, of money, right?
Right.
Really doesn't have to be so serious. It's just like
Seriously.
a stupid game that someone else made up, and the rules are stupid, and
quite literally
it doesn't have to be that way.
Yes.
All of these things, right, are, think about this from the perspective of a person or group of people who understand how creation works.
Yeah.
Then what you're doing is you are orchestrating, manipulating a mass manifestation of outcomes.
Okay,
at a
gotcha.
global
Yeah.
level, right? Because if you have enough people focusing their consciousness on an outcome and then feeling the intense emotion of fear,
right,
what's going to happen? And then you know this from Joe Dispenza's work, right?
Yeah.
That is incoherence of
Right.
the heart and the brain, and that causes disease that will create
dis-ease in the body. Yes.
Yeah, and in your external world. So
yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love how you explain that, because the dis-ease that can be created within us and outwards of us that can kind of be put on us is when we are being told to fear something. Like you said, collectively, if it's being put on the news or whatever, like we can be taught, hey, this impending thing is about to happen. So everybody watching the news collectively is going to fear that, and it's going to create that fear emotion within their bodies and project that outwards, creating that dis-ease. And I feel like that is how they are able to do this on such a large scale, in part. You know what I mean? Like they are able to, in most places, the only information people get is from the media, is from the news, is from the government, not any external research on their own. And so in that way, like they are choosing for you how you are going to feel today, how you are going to think about your life today, how you're going to think about the world today. And giving somebody else that power is always going to leave you feeling scared, regardless of what's going on around you. Because of course there are things that could happen that wouldn't be ideal or fun to necessarily experience in our eyes. But it's like when you let somebody create that understanding for you before you even experience it, like it's crazy. Like that is them creating your reality for you. You're not creating it yourself now. You are watching the TV and turning it on to understand what your reality is going to be like today, rather than creating your reality from an internal place of peace and love and calmness. You are letting the world like bait you and create a fear-based experience of life.
Yeah, and whether that creation or that sort of like global or mass construct is happening from people who understand manifestation and want people to create in mass a certain reality, whether that's going on, or whether these people just know about marketing and how people respond based on emotion, and they're not spiritually evolved and they have no idea what's actually going on. It doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it's like, even if you're not spiritual, even if you don't believe in any of this stuff, if you are one of the millions and millions of households who have the news on during dinner, you're being programmed. Like, period. You're giving up your sovereignty. And my perspective on the news is like, if it's really important, I'll know.
Right.
The information will make its way to me. I don't
Right.
need to watch a screen and watch somebody tell me something.
Right. Because then you're letting that narrative and their perspective enter your world and manipulate your world, which sometimes you need new information to come in and to have a greater understanding, but in such a way where it creates so much fear and scarcity mindset, like that's just not a healthy vibration to live in. And so when you're constantly living in that it doesn't allow you to truly express and experience authentically in the world because somebody's constantly telling you how to experience.
Yeah.
And so with that, I would love to hear how you manifest and kind of how you uncondition yourself and recondition yourself and your techniques for that.
Yeah. Ooh, so good. Okay. So there's not really, like, I used to prescribe to techniques. And if you Google, go on YouTube, you're going to find tons of manifestation techniques, right? Now where I'm at, it's more like a process or a framework that I believe that each individual needs to customize.
Right.
So it's like, once you understand these foundational pieces of, a little bit of like quantum physics, a little bit of heart-brain coherence, all these little pieces from different disciplines, you can take it and apply it to your unique situation. And some of the pieces that I think are really fundamental or foundational, first is emotional intelligence. So when we perceive something that we created in our screen of space that disturbs us in some way, we need to be able to kind of zoom out from that emotion and to let it move through our bodies rather than being stuck in the emotion and letting that turn into like having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month.
Right.
And also on the flip side of that, developing a practice of deliberately cultivating positive emotions. So daily feeling gratitude and doing that from your own creation, not something outside of you that made you feel the gratitude, but tapping into that yourself. And even if that means for a while practicing, like looking at a spectrum of emotions and practicing, can I make myself feel angry right now? Can I make myself feel sad? Can I make myself feel happy or optimistic or enthusiastic? Practice all of them because none are good or bad.
Right.
So when you're able to remove the judgment from the emotional experience,
judgment's huge.
That's like the first piece to setting yourself free.
Right.
And the next is to question absolutely everything. So question everything that I say, like take what serves you and leave what doesn't.
100%.
There's going to be, we're all on a unique journey, right? And so there's going to be some information that comes in that feels really good. Some that you're like, this is crap. But then maybe 6 months later, you're going to revisit that same information and be like, whoa, this totally blew my mind. Like, I'm ready to receive this. I get it. Or maybe it'll still be crap. Doesn't matter. But that's essential to reclaiming your power and reclaiming your sovereignty.
Right. I never underestimate the power of planting a seed. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, because everybody, again, like you said, is on their own journey. So they might not be ready to hear something right now. So don't try and push anything on anybody. Like, that's one of my biggest things is I never want to tell people how to think or what to think. I just want to let you know that I'm over here thinking differently. So if you've ever wanted to, or if you've ever felt like things are kind of off, or you want to do your own research, I'm here with you. And I just want to encourage other people to do their own research. I don't want you to think like me or any of that kind of thing. Just think for yourself.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I think kind of a core component or purpose to these first two steps, like the emotional intelligence and releasing judgment, and then thinking for yourself and questioning everything, is to release the conditioning. So, for example, if you find yourself looping a thought over and over, or coming back to a memory that feels bad or some sort of a trauma, that is literally blocking you from accessing your fullest expression of like divine nature.
Right.
And so you need the emotional intelligence and you need the mental focus to be able to detach yourself from that trauma pattern. And when I say trauma, it doesn't have to be like super severe. It could literally just be like somebody said something mean to you when you were 8 on the playground, right? But only you know what is kind of stuck as a program in your mind.
Right.
And so once you commit to that process of healing or releasing or deconditioning, whatever you want to call it, then you're in a space to really begin to apply any of the techniques with great success.
Right.
Because the only purpose of any of these manifestation techniques is to alter your state, which means altering your beliefs and your assumptions about yourself, about the world, about what's possible for you, about what you can create. And then it's just a simple game of focus and persistence, you know? And a component of that persistence is not only within your consciousness, but it's also allowing yourself to take inspired action, allowing yourself to fail or to receive a no, or to, you know, have a perceived moment of contrast and extract the lessons from that rather than let that become stored as a trauma pattern.
Right. 100%.
So that's, yeah.
100%. I absolutely love that. I think it's so much of realizing what doesn't serve you, what's kind of clogged, like whatever's ingrained in your brain or your body, those things that don't serve you, learning how to let them go and release them and become your best self. And so, yeah, it's beautiful. Oh my God. I absolutely love this conversation. We are like an hour 42.
I know.
But no, I have to though. I definitely have to have you on again though.
I
absolutely have to have you on again.
Part 2 for sure.
Yeah, seriously, thank you so much for doing this with me. Like, this was amazing. All right, guys, that was all for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, learning, and growing with me. I hope you continue to do so. A huge thank you to Amanda. You can find her on her website at AmandaLuketa.com, where she offers self-concept coaching and also has free tips and guides on how to start and grow an online business and so much more. I will have all of that linked down below, as well as her other social medias, such as TikTok and Instagram. My social medias will also be linked down below, so definitely go and check those out. And as always, keep an open mind, do your own research, and think for yourself. Sending so much love. Bye, guys.